ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः। We are on page 361 of the first volume of the 5-volume English translation of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and the chapter 6, the setting is Thakur is in the shrine of a devotee, and the subheading which M has given is Nitya Gopal, who is one of Thakur's very close devotee, will be the subject of today's discussion, and he is present there. Now the heading given by M is very unusual. Thakur in the shrine of a devotee, first part. Second part, newspapers. It's very interesting. And the third is Nitya Gopal. So these three topics will be covered in this particular section. Now the situation is described by M first in one paragraph. Girish stands at the door to greet Sri Ramakrishna. As soon as Thakur and his devotees approach, Girish lies prostrate before him. He rises at Sri Ramakrishna's bidding. Takes the dust of his feet and leads him to the sitting room on the second floor. He asks him to sit there, and the devotees quickly sit down. Everyone is eager to be near him and to drink his sweet words. So the whole setting has been beautifully described by M, and Girish, as usual, full of devotion and faith, is escorting Thakur, and the waiting devotees are very eager to hear his nectar-like words. But see, the whole scene changes now. As he sits down, Thakur notices a newspaper lying there. Now in those days, print media, the main print media was the newspaper. The British had introduced, and Calcutta being the capital of the British India, there would be a lot of newspapers in circulation. So everybody used to, at least every house, they used to subscribe to these newspapers. But Thakur had an allergy for these newspapers because they dealt only with worldly things. He did not mind other books, but he was somehow very allergic to newspaper because there is only politics and all sorts of worldly news in that. And M describes why Sri Ramakrishna hated newspapers. Newspapers have to do with worldly minded men, worldly matters, gossip, running down others. So a newspaper is unholy to Sri Ramakrishna. Now any magazine or anything which has these characteristics, the
newspapers have to do with worldly minded men, worldly matters, gossip, running down.
So the newspaper represented, if you see, during Sri Ramakrishna's time, perhaps the only social media. There was no television, there was no other social media. So newspapers were something very new to his age, and suddenly there was an information revolution, mostly information of the negative kind, and that was to revolutionize society, the way we lived. A lot of publicity was given, and people would know the things, though not as instantly as today. Today we have all the things which are happening all over the world because of the internet and communication, ICT, information and communication revolution. We get instant news. But in those days, the newspaper, even though the news was a bit outdated because it took time for things to be reported, still was something very new, and Sri Ramakrishna belonged to that age where newspapers were just introduced or perhaps becoming very popular in Kolkata. So every devotee's house would have a newspaper. But Sri Ramakrishna never liked. Just as people hate television and social media, some of the spiritual people, they somehow feel that if there is a television or there are certain things in their house which really don't significantly contribute to their well-being, they are better off with that, better off not having those things. So you see, but sometimes the motives are different. People think that their children are building up their career. There are other worldly motives also to stop watching television, but normally a spiritual household would rather do without television and the other sorts of media which has become, because if it is used in a proper way, it can be wonderful. And now during this COVID, naturally a lot of people are trying to make good use of the media. But in newspapers in those days would definitely not publish Sri Ramakrishna's gospel, and though some magazines, some journals published by Keshav Chandra Sen, for example, made Sri Ramakrishna's teachings popular. So not that Sri Ramakrishna was against this media, but he was against newspapers which were predominantly written by worldly minded people, and that is why he was terribly allergic, to the extent that if a newspaper was brought to the room and kept on a chair, he would not sit on that chair. He will first tell the people to remove that chair. He makes a sign. You see, that's why Master M says the newspaper is extremely unholy to Sri Ramakrishna. He makes a sign that it should be removed. Before that, he would not even take his seat. So it had to be immediately, hurriedly, they had to remove it. So it's not that somebody was reading a newspaper, it was just lying there. But he was so allergic to it, he said, first you remove that. He was obsessed with that idea that anything worldly, anything that concerned with gross things, gossip and all these worldly matters, with which half of humanity, or not half, majority of the humanity always seems to be engaged, even the so-called spiritual aspirants. So Sri Ramakrishna was extremely averse to the idea of even the newspaper. I wonder what would have happened if he had come across the modern media. Anyway, he makes a sign that it should be removed. When the newspaper is taken away, he sits. Nitya Gopal salutes him. So Nitya Gopal is one of those devotees who was full of devotion, and he was very devoted to Sri Ramakrishna. So Ramakrishna is asking Nitya Gopal, why have you not been to Dakshineshwar? Why have you not come? It was after a long time, perhaps he was seeing him. Sir, I haven't gone to Dakshineshwar because I haven't been well, I had pain. He is asking him why he had not gone to Dakshineshwar, because this place is the house of a devotee. Thakur is visiting Kolkata, and this place is the shrine of a devotee. So he says, why don't you come to Dakshineshwar these days? So as I said, most of the people who had no access to vehicles and horse carriage and other things, or boat fare and other things, they had to travel a lot to go to Dakshineshwar. They would rather prefer to meet Sri Ramakrishna in the house of devotees whenever he came to Kolkata. So Sri Ramakrishna says, okay, how are you now? Nitya, I am still not well. So he had some kind of illness and he could not go. Then he says, you'd better bring your mind down 1 or 2 notes, because he was aware that Nitya Gopal was a devotee, was always inclined to be doing japa and all the devotional practices, that his mind would rather feel uncomfortable if it had to dwell upon worldly matters. So that perhaps caused a bit of strain in his head, or pain. I don't know what pain he is referring to, but assuming that the pain is caused by excessive spiritual practices, Sri Ramakrishna says, why don't you bring your mind down 1 or 2 notes? Because 1 or 2 notes means, Thakur used to say sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni. So he used to say, when you go to ni, the highest note in music, you can't be on that note for a long time. you have to come down to sa or come down to some intermediate note. So that is the idea here, refrain here. He says you better bring your mind down one or two notes so that now and then you can just mix with the world. He was such a devotee of such a high caliber. Nitya Gopal was somebody whom Sri Ramakrishna loved for his spiritual sensitivity. Then Nitya says something very significant. I don't like people's company. Sri Ramakrishna also used to tell a lot of devotees, especially those who were likely to be extremely social in their approach, and he did not approve of congregational religion as the Brahmos practice. They thought just mixing together and doing some prayers and congregational prayers, that's a typically Western idea of religion. That is fine. Congregational religion is something is better than nothing, but religion is normally a relationship of a devotee or a sadhaka with his Ishta, the personal God whom he believes, or the impersonal ideal which he believes. In any case, it says individual journey from the individual soul to the supreme soul. So this is what just a minute, there are some people waiting in the lobby. Yeah. So most of the sadhakas, Sri Ramakrishna used to tell them, you have to practice some kind of solitude now and then. When you are not in company, you can think about spiritual matters. So Nitya Gopal was one of them who tried to avoid mixing too much with other people, so that even with devotees. So he found that solitude suits him. So he says, I don't like people's company. They say so many things that frighten me. But at other times I feel strong. Because you see, normally the tendency when you mix indiscriminately with people is that they try to talk negative things rather than talk about positive things. The mind has been trained in such a way that a majority of the people see the negative side of life or negative side of things, saying that this is bad, that is bad, but they don't talk about things which are good in life. There are many good things happening in this world. But if the mind has been trained to see, or mind has been more familiar and has been trained in such a way that it sees the negative side of things, then it will be preoccupied with that thing. And as a result, your whole personality will become negative. So that's why Nitya Gopal is saying that I don't mix with people, even though they may be good devotees, in the sense they would be visiting Sri Ramakrishna. But he doesn't like to mix because they tell many things which frightens him. Now and then they would tell certain things in a pessimistic way, and that would frighten him. But at other times I feel strong. So he's telling this problem to Sri Ramakrishna, that instead of mixing indiscriminately, I try to avoid company, because there are some people who will give you positive thoughts, but they are so few that I end up listening to things which increase my fear. But other times I feel strong. Perhaps if he does japa, if he does some spiritual practices, he regains his strength, but he wants to avoid unnecessarily mixing with people who will frighten him, who will bring him down to the frighten, in the sense it's not just fear of anything, but it's more of a fear that he will be attracted to the world. So that is the reason why he feels that others may influence me to become worldly in my approach to life. So that's why it frightens me. It's not that they frighten him in any worldly sense, but it frightens him that he will lose his spirituality if he mixes indiscriminately. But Sri Ramakrishna says it is only natural. If you are in company, worldly company, the fright is natural. Who lives with you? So he is asking him, who are the people who live with you? Why are you so frightened? Nitya says, Tarak, he is always with me, but at times even he bothers me. Now you can imagine, Tarak is Swami Shiv, who later on became Swami Shivananda. Though he was married, but his wife died and he was a widower, and later on he became spiritual. So Nitya Gopal was right from childhood was a highly devoted type of person. So he says, even he bothers me, means he was perhaps feeling that living in the company even of some good people would rather distract his mind. There are two reasons for distraction. Not that Tarak was going to make him worldly or something like that, but sometimes it so happens that when different people of different ideas they come together, then there is a tendency that you may lose your particular faith or the particular path which you are following. That may be there, but you may be induced or forced by somebody else's company to change your path. That happens very often. So to protect oneself, sometimes people resort to solitude. So Sri Ramakrishna says, it is always natural that you feel frightened in the company of people, but then it is you don't have to worry so much. But and still he asks him, why are good people also frightening you? He says, they don't frighten me, but sometimes I feel it is a botheration. Now you see how Thakur answers. He says, Sri Ramakrishna says, Totapuri used to say that there was a person at his monastery who had acquired some miraculous powers. Now you see, in the same monastery, there may be some people who may not be at the same wavelength, who may not be tuned to the high spiritual ideal which others have. It's not that they are worldly, but they live in the same monastery, but they have come there with different ideals. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna says. Totapuri used to say that in his monastery in Kurukshetra, he belonged to a Dashanami order of Advaitic monks. So in that order, there were some other monks also who had come with different attitudes. Not all are of the same attitude. So Totapuri was of course a highly accomplished Advaitin. So naturally he did not like some of the inmates who were keen to get some miraculous powers. You see, people come to spirituality with different ideas, and as a result of spiritual practice, Raj Yoga says, you may come across certain experiences, certain things which might tempt you to follow those miraculous powers. So he used to walk around gazing at the sky. He had developed some powers using some kind of dharana. When we discuss dharana, we will come to that. Before dhyana, there is dharana. When you do dharana on different aspects, on different objects, you get different powers. That is one stage one has to be very careful with. So you get some kind of vision or some kind of experience which deters you from going further towards dhyana and samadhi. So one of those monastic inmates of Totapuri, who was Sri Ramakrishna's Advaitin Guru, he says he used to walk around in the open gazing at the sky. Perhaps you all know that Totapuri's monastery had made rules that nobody could stay indoors. They practically spent their whole time outdoors under the trees. When it was raining, perhaps they would stay under some shelter, but not in between, inside four walls. They would never be confined to a room. That's why when he came to Panchavati, he used to stay under the big Panchavati tree. He came to Dakshineshwar, he used to stay under the big Panchavati tree because that gave him protection from the rain. So Totapuri, and then there was a small hut where perhaps if it rained too much he would go in, but normally they avoided staying in big buildings or even small buildings. So this Totapuri's monastery, there was this monk who according to Totapuri used to gaze at the sky and do some kind of dharana. So if the object of contemplation is sky, you get certain miraculous powers. If your object of contemplation of dharana is something else, you get different powers. All the Sanyama, the idea of Sanyama is explained in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. You can do Sanyama on different objects of Prakriti around you and you develop certain powers. But the yogi is discouraged from doing that. Whereas in Totapuri's monastery, One of the monks used to do that, and he had developed some powers. But when his companion Ganesh Garji left him, he became disconsolate. He became disconsolate because he was used to somebody's company with whom he developed these powers perhaps. And when that person left the monastery, he became disconsolate because he was not practicing his sadhana properly. So Thakur is now giving Nitya Gopal a hint that what your attitude is fine, but you don't have to be disturbed by anybody, especially if the aspirant is spiritual. The loneliness or the aloneness, or you don't like people's company, but don't develop a negative attitude towards anybody. Don't hate the person. He said even Tarak sometimes bothers me. So he says you should not do that, because if that is the case, then it will be very difficult for you. You have to practice mental solitude. Then Sri Ramakrishna, while speaking, suddenly, after giving this example of Totapuri, he says Sri Ramakrishna goes into samadhi, in ecstasy, in a different, and in that state he used to utter something which M could not decipher. He could not understand what Sri Ramakrishna used to mean when he uttered certain sentences when he was just about to go to Bhav Samadhi. So in that mood he remains speechless. First of all, he won't speak anything. When he comes down a little from that high state of Samadhi or Bhava, he will say something which M has recorded here, but he doesn't know the implication. He says, who understands these words? Is this the language of the gods? So what did Sri Ramakrishna say to everybody? He uttered something which was not connected with the previous sentences. It was something strange. And what was that? He said, you have come, I am here too. He was speaking to somebody. Now what was he seeing? Was he seeing some subtle being around him? Maybe there was some subtle being who had come to supplicate him. And he says, I am here too, please come. I mean, people were wonderstruck. Whom is Thakur talking to? He is talking to somebody. You have come. He is asking the question. That means he is seeing somebody, some disembodied spirit or being, some holy spirit, and he says, I am here too. You please come. So you have come. So the people are speechless because they don't know whether Thakur is seeing some vision. Is he seeing? Is this the language of the gods? Is he communicating with some higher being in some higher sphere? Nobody knows it, but M honestly has recorded what he heard, and he is not able to understand. Now, many devotees are sitting near Sri Ramakrishna. Among them are Narendra, Girish, Rama, Haripada, Chunilal Ghosh, who used to stay near. Chuni was a very poor devotee, as I told you before also, and Sri Ramakrishna was very keen that since he did not have money to travel to Dakshineshwar, he used to request all the devotees who invited Sri Ramakrishna to their house for some satsang. He used to say, have you invited Chuni? If you read Chuni's biography, you will find how much Thakur loved him. This humble, poor but humble devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna did not forget him. So no doubt there would be a big rush, but he would never forget to mention a few names and tell the devotees that when you organize a function in your room, in your shrine or in your house, please don't forget to invite. So Chunilal Ghosh is there, Balram is there. Of course, Balram, maybe this conversation itself is taking place in Balram's house. They have just written the house of a devotee, so that has not been disclosed. The shrine of the devotee, it may be Balram's own house. And M, of course, is there. M was present during all the conversations which have been recorded. So Narendra does not believe that God incarnates in a human body. Now Narendra has just started coming, and he has faith in Sri Ramakrishna, but he doesn't have faith that God can incarnate as a human, because being a Brahmo, they would not accept the personal God. So the idea of personal God is not very palatable to Naren even now. It was only towards the end of Sri Ramakrishna's life he accepted under exceptional circumstances the fact that God can incarnate, and when he said he who was Rama and he who was Krishna has come as Ramakrishna. But that was much later. Narendra does not believe that God incarnates in a human body. On the other hand, Girish has burning faith, and God incarnates in every age, as Gita promises, yada yada idharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. So Sri Krishna has said, whenever there is a decadence of spirituality, adharma becomes strong, then to save dharma, to protect dharma, I come incarnate myself in every age. So perhaps Girish has, even Swami Vivekananda has read this, but somehow he does not have faith right now that God can incarnate unless he gets that experience himself, that Sri Ramakrishna is an incarnation. He would not believe. He is a rationalist, and Brahmos did not believe in incarnations. But anyway, Girish believes, and Girish's faith is such that he believes that God assumes a human body and comes down to this mortal world in flesh and blood. He says to Girish, Thakur wants the two to argue this matter. Now Thakur was very intelligent. He was a great teacher, one of the best teachers the world has ever produced. He knew how to handle all his disciples. He knew there were some disciples who had faith, some disciples who had knowledge, some disciples who had a different mentality. He knew what advice to give, how to make them interact, and indirectly give the advice. You see, he is not telling Naren to accept what he thinks is true. He is making him argue with Girish so that some of Girish's faith may come and he may accept that God can incarnate. So Thakur wants the two to argue this matter. He will not take sides. He will just be impartial. He says to Girish, discuss this for a while in English. I want to listen. Thakur was very humorous, though he did not understand much of English, but obviously he understood, he could read the minds of both. So the conversation, whether it was in English, Hindi or any other language, or Bengali, of course he could understand. It was not difficult for Sri Ramakrishna to fathom what was going on in the minds of both. So he said, why don't you argue in English? So the discussion starts, but not in English, in Bengali, with a few words of English interspersed. Even in those days it was a fashion. Even if you spoke Bengali, you would be using some English words, philosophical terms. So Narendranath is saying, maybe in Bengali, that God is infinite. Maybe he used the word Ananta, but in Bengali that is the word for infinite, but he might have used the word infinite. So infinite. It is not possible for us to comprehend him. Naren says that. He is present within everybody. It is not that he appears in only one human body. So Naren believes in the Vishishtadvaita theory that God, the Dvaitins believe, the Dvaitins means followers of Madhvacharya, that the Ishvara and Jiva can never have any connection. Jiva will always remain a Jiva, and the Supreme Soul can become Ishvara. The Ishvara becomes, who is the personal God, is always separate. Whereas Vishishtadvaita believes that God can be present in individual souls also, but there is a difference between individual soul and the Supreme Soul. So we can at the most be very close to the incarnations, but you can't be one with him. Advaita says there is no need for any incarnation. You yourself are Brahman. If you realize you are Brahman or the Satchidananda, then it is there is absolutely no difference between incarnation and you. So Advaitins don't believe. So Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda is taking the Advaitic position and saying, but he accepts partially that God is present within everybody, a spirit. But he appears, but not that he appears only in one human body. He can appear through anybody, through all the animals, through plants and all those things, Prakriti. So Sri Ramakrishna does not discourage him, but affectionately says, I agree with him. I agree with him means I agree with Narendra. He is everywhere, because according to different schools the conception of God varies, and Sri Ramakrishna was such a wonderful teacher that he did not contradict anything, accepted everything, but said, don't think that is the only opinion. That may be Ramanuja's opinion, that may be the Vishishta Advaita faith, but there can be some other faiths also which may be equally true at a different, from a different standpoint. So he says, but this is, I agree with him that God is everywhere. I agree with Narendra, Thakur is saying. But this is also true that there is a difference in manifestation of the divine power. Now he says you have to admit this. God is everywhere. That doesn't mean the God which is there in that small animal is the same as God in a great saint. The saint has some wonderful qualities. The powerful people have different qualities than weak people. So how can you say that the same God is everywhere? Then everybody should be the same. He says no. He manifests himself, but there is a difference in the manifestation of the divine power. The Prakriti manifests differently in different people. Purusha may be same. The Purusha behind the Prakriti is always the same. But the Jiva, which is a mixture of Purusha and Prakriti, the apparent human Jivatma, that Jivatma has different powers. You can't say all are same. We may think that all are same, all should be treated equally. That is fine, but not from the point of from the worldly viewpoint. It is from the supreme, the spiritual viewpoint that the same Atma resides in all. So he says it's okay, but he manifests himself, he means the Supreme Lord, in some people as ignorance, avidya, and some people as knowledge. So some people are born worldly, they live as a worldly life and die as worldly people. Avidya Shakti and Vidya Shakti, that is what he says. So Shakti is the same, Prakriti only acts like this, but if it is Avidya Shakti, that power will make a person more and more worldly. It will take him more and more towards the gross. The same Shakti has another aspect, the Vidya Shakti. That is the knowledge, power of knowledge, which will take him higher and higher from the gross to the subtle and beyond the subtle towards the Purusha. So all men are not equal. So Ram is also sitting there, and he was a devotee, so he did not want this kind of discussion. He said, what's the fun? Naren will say one thing, Girish will contradict him, and then they will go on arguing. Somehow he had come to hear Sri Ramakrishna, so he said, what is the use of all this concept? But you see the wonderful wisdom of Sri Ramakrishna, what a great teacher he is. He does not agree with Ram. He says, Sri Ramakrishna sharply stops him and says, no, it has a special significance. Even these arguments, these discussions have a great significance. You see how liberal, how wonderful Sri Ramakrishna's teaching is. He says, Girish, Sri Ramakrishna just stops Ram and says, let the conversation continue, let Girish give his viewpoint. Naren has said something, okay, fine, that is his view. I agree with him, but I added certain things to what Naren said. I corrected him, but now let us see what Girish says. Give him a chance, and there is a place for argument. I have asked them to argue, and why does Ram come in between, Ramchandra Datta, and interfere and say that what's the use of such conversation? See, this is a very important thing. All are disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, but if the Guru says something, the Guru says you argue, he is telling two disciples. The third disciple, if he is a genuine disciple, he has no right to tell that what is the use of something. That means he is contradicting his own Guru. Now if he is contradicting his own Guru, that means he doesn't have faith. Does he think that Sri Ramakrishna thinks that these discussions are useless? If the discussions were useless, he would not have asked. It was he who initiated. He said, Naren, you argue with Girish, let me hear, and that too in English. Now there is a subtle purpose. If you have faith in the Guru, then even such contradictory advice has to be taken, implicitly obeyed. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is annoyed with Ram. Ram thinks he is very intelligent and he says, what is the use? Perhaps he doesn't like, but he says, wait a minute. You may not like, but there is a need for such discussions, and what I said is consciously said so that they too argue. So let us see what happens after that. Girish tells Narendra, how do you know that he doesn't assume a human body? Now this is a wonderful question, very logical question. He says, of course you don't believe that he takes up a human body, but you say I don't know, but you can't say he doesn't assume a human body, because you don't have that capacity to understand. Now Girish's faith is also, you see, the discussion is a very, very positive discussion and very rational also. So Girish Ghosh is asking Narendra, how do you know that he does not take a body? I am not saying you accept that he takes a body, but you should not also say that he cannot take. Leave it open. Since we don't know, why should we give our opinion? Nobody has asked for our opinion, and you are trying to contradict or maybe say that God is only like this, he cannot be born as a human body. So now Naren has to argue. Then Narendra says, Narendra is not going to give up. He was very good at argument, and he would not accept anything, not with any bad intention, but he would not accept anything unless he knew it was true. So true to his nature, he says, he is beyond speech and mind. He means God is beyond speech and mind. So how can he come as an incarnation? That is his argument. Now you see what Thakur says. Now he is listening to the conversation and he wants to correct both Narendra as well as both are disciples. So he said, let them argue, because he is correcting Naren first. He corrected Naren first. Now Girish has said something and Naren has given some explanation, and now he is giving his opinion on the conversation between the two disciples. So Narendra says he is beyond speech and mind. That is what the Upanishad also says. God is beyond, Satchidananda is beyond the mind, beyond the body, beyond speech. He cannot be described. In a way it is true. But when we come to the concept of incarnation, there are other things also we have to consider. Sri Ramakrishna says, no, don't say he is beyond speech and mind. Now this is a new thing Sri Ramakrishna is telling. He can be known by the pure intellect. The pure intellect and the pure Atman are indeed the same. The Rishis realize the pure Atman with their pure intellect. The Vijnanamaya Kosha, where when you practice sadhana, you go from gross Annamaya Kosha to the Pranamaya Kosha, that gets purified, then you go to the different steps of yoga are meant to purify the different states of our personality. So you go to the Manomaya Kosha, then you go to the Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is the most important aspect of our spiritual sadhana. To those who have been blessed with initiation and who have been fortunate enough to be initiated into some mantra or some spiritual practice, they should remember that whoever be their guru, the instruction is given to think of God as beyond the is Satchidananda Brahman, but since he has come, we have to meditate on the Ishta or the personal form of that God in the heart, which is nothing but the Vijnanamaya Kosha, the Buddhi. So the Buddhi, the intellect means Buddhi here. The word Buddhi is more appropriate. Intellect sometimes gives you an idea that it's the mind. So the Western concept of intellect is just the mind, a superior mind which is very sharp, which thinks of itself is wise, very wise. But as Sri Ramakrishna says, even the wise people should know that a crow thinks it is very wise, but it is still eating filth. The crow eats filth, which he sees. It eats good things also, but it also eats filth. So a worldly intellect is not what is meant here. So English language is not good enough to explain. The word used in Bengali, Thakur says, Shuddha Mon, Shuddha Atma or Shuddha Buddhi Ek. So Buddhi means it is not just the intellect, the English intellect, it is the subtle level at which we try to understand, the subtle spiritual understanding which comes as a result of the fructification of sadhana, especially the levels of buddhi are sharpened. When the buddhi becomes very, very pure, it is not contaminated by worldly intelligence. The intelligence which a worldly person has, though he may be a nuclear physicist or a Nobel laureate, it doesn't really matter. That is the intellect of the gross. But the intellect, when it becomes refined and pure in the spiritual sense, that buddhi is the buddhi which rishis had. That is wisdom. So a intelligent man need not be wise. There is, you can call buddhi as true spiritual wisdom rather than calling it intelligence, because intelligence has an entirely different connotation. So the most intelligent being can be a spiritual pygmy in the spiritual life. He can be a spiritual pygmy because intelligence of the gross things cannot be called intelligence. Sri Ramakrishna is otherwise will confuse that intelligence and how can Atman in intelligence. So he says he can be known by the pure intellect. That intellect which has no worldliness left, it is just pure, shining, bright, and very, very subtle, sukshma. It has become so subtle that it can perceive Satchidananda or perceive that supreme consciousness. The rishis realize the pure Atman with their pure intellect. So the rishis who revealed the Vedas to us, who revealed the Upanishads to us, and the great saints and the incarnations, their words, they are a product of an intelligence which has nothing to do, even the dullest mind from the worldly point of view. Latu Maharaj, he never went to school, but can you say the same thing about his intellect? No, he had an intellect which was sharper than all the big Nobel laureates when it comes to spirituality. He could understand so many wonderful things that Latu Maharaj, who could not even pronounce or write his own name, when he used to go and listen to, there's a beautiful anecdote about him. So when he was in Banaras, when he was in Belur Math, Swamiji had asked some of the younger monks, especially Shuddhanandji, who was a great scholar, Sanskrit scholar, to take classes for brahmacharis and other monastics. So many people used to attend, even senior monks used to come and attend. And Swamiji had made a rule that whoever is present, all have to come. So Latu Maharaj used to sometimes come and sit on the last bench, because he thought, I am a illiterate person, what will I understand? They are all discussing big shastras, and normally people who have this knowledge of Upanishads and all, they think they are absolutely bright, not knowing that that is not intelligence at all. But anyway, he used to sit on the last bench and listen to these classes. So he perhaps did not understand many of the philosophical terms, but when Swami Shuddhanandji, Sudhir Maharaj, his name was Sudhir Maharaj. Sudhir Maharaj was explaining the Kathopanishad, one of the verses of the Kathopanishad, where Atman has been described as Angushta Matra Purushaha. Angushta Matra means the size of a thumb, that bright light which is of the size of a thumb, which shines in the spiritual heart. Now that is the verse in the Upanishad, Kathopanishad. So he was trying to explain the Sanskrit, and he gave the description of this wonderful vision which a rishi had, which the rishi who from whom the wonderful verses of Kathopanishad have been received by humanity. So one of the rishis had realized, and he has written, he has compiled this Kathopanishad. So the Kathopanishad was the spiritual experience of a rishi who saw this Atman as having the size of a thumb, shining brightly in the cave of the heart. So that is the description which is there. And Latu Maharaj, though he had absolutely no knowledge or no intelligence or could not understand Sanskrit or any other argument, only he heard the translation when Sudhir said that the Atman is, he immediately tallied with one of the experiences he had during meditation. And he said, Sudhir, theek bolche, Sudhir, theek bolche. He started just jumping around in the class, and he said, yes, he's saying the right thing, he's saying the right thing. Now all others were a bit surprised. What does he understand? He's an illiterate person. One of the, he was more illiterate, he could not even write his name. So how could this person appreciate this? Perhaps it did not strike them. But then, and he just was so happy, having confirmed his experience. What he saw in meditation, he says, the Kathopanishad also says the same thing. So that means my experience is right, though he did not understand the philosophical implications, because he was not educated in that sense. So after that, at night, when Sudhir Maharaj, after the class was over, they all went to, Latu Maharaj used to normally meditate even during night. So he gets up and then he wakes up Sudhir. He was so excited that day that he woke up Sudhir and said, Sudhir, what you said in the afternoon when you spoke about that Angushta Matra Purusha, that wonderful vision, that is absolutely correct. You exactly spoke what I saw. And it happened for several days. So Sudhir Maharaj was so impressed that you see how a totally illiterate shepherd boy who became a monk, Swami Adbhutananda, could understand the spiritual reality, could understand the intricate spiritual things, not by his worldly intellect but by the experience. So it is in this sense the intellect which perceives things through directly and gets the experience is what is meant here. When Sri Ramakrishna says, when he says the rishis realize the pure Atman with their pure intellect, it is the intellect of the type which Latu Maharaj had, or other direct disciples and other people who had these visions. So their pure intellect is nothing but the pure Atman. So God can be perceived. So Naren has been corrected now. Naren accepted that, of course, saying that you cannot say that he cannot be perceived by the buddhi. He can be perceived by a purified buddhi, because the purified buddhi becomes one with the Atman, become one with the consciousness, the Supreme Satchidananda. Now Girish is continuing, after hearing Sri Ramakrishna, Girish is giving an answer to Naren's argument. He says to Narendra, if God does not incarnate in a human body, who will teach mankind? Now this is his argument. There may be logical problem with this, but anyway, he says, if God doesn't incarnate, then how can humankind know who will be able to teach? The people who will be teach will be equally ignorant, though they may have got a Nobel Prize, but they will be equally ignorant about spiritual realities because they don't have experience in this. So it doesn't really matter whether one is a Nobel laureate or a person like Latu Maharaj who did not even go to school, as long as he has this wonderful intellect. So he says, who will teach mankind? You can't expect academic scholars to come and teach spirituality to you. He assumes a human body, only an incarnation can teach. So he assumes a human body to teach knowledge and love for God. If he doesn't, who will? Now this is Girish Ghosh's counter argument to Narendra. Then Narendra also is not going to give up now. He says, why should he come as a human body, in a human body? He can teach from within the heart. He can directly inspire people. He doesn't have to take a physical body. Sri Ramakrishna, now though he is very impartial, but at the same time he is agreeing with both as different ways of looking at reality. He says, Sri Ramakrishna very affectionately is agreeing with Narendra here. Yes, he will teach as our inner controller, Antaryamin. Antaryamin is a word which is used for a god. So Antaryamin is nothing, according to the Bhakti scriptures. God is the Antaryamin. We have to imagine that Sri Ramakrishna is sitting inside and controlling. When he controls you, he is controlling you not as the physical Sri Ramakrishna. He is controlling you as an Antaryamin. So Thakur says, yes, he is our inner controller. He will teach us as our inner controller. When you worship Sri Ramakrishna outside, when you read his gospel, because we can't always think that he is controlling us from within. When you can't do that, we read the gospel, we try to meditate, we try to do what our Guru has told us. But when he becomes the inner controller, then you don't need sadhana, because he will control everything. That means you have surrendered everything to him. So what Narendra says is true at a certain stage of spiritual progress. So he agrees with him. Yes, if you feel that he is your inner controller, For everything that you do, if you feel he is your inner controller, then definitely you are at a stage where you can say that God can inspire by sitting within the heart. Otherwise, if you still don't have faith, then you have to have faith in the incarnations and think that he comes in a human body to teach us. So either way you reach the goal, but they are different stages, and Sri Ramakrishna is definitely agreeing with both Naren and Girish. So that is the importance of this argument. He just silenced Ram by saying that, you see, because of this argument so many things became clear. We agree with Narendra. I agreed with Narendra on certain aspects. I agreed with Girish also. He has a different approach to Satchidananda Brahman. So that Brahman, which is an incarnation, also can become an Antaryamin when he sits in your heart and guides and controls you. But when you can't feel him as Antaryamin, why don't you see him as an incarnation, a lovable incarnation, who responds to your prayers, who is a human being, very much a human being, who can be seen, who can be talked to. Sri Ramakrishna talked to his mother, Divine Mother. He talked to the Divine Mother and asked her questions, and perhaps she answered from within as an Antaryamin also. So the answer can come directly through visions or also through within your heart and you get your own answers, or it can come through the mouth of anybody, including the Guru. So the Guru can tell you, or even as Thakur says, even a child will come and say something to you, and if you are sensitive enough and if God gives you the intellect and the wisdom, you might get some good hints from that. So God can act through anybody. He can act through a human being, he can act through a child, so, or he can directly influence you as an Antaryamin. So now a heated discussion begins. Now this is not the end of the discussion, because Naren is not going to give up so easily. Though Thakur has agreed with him, he wants to still argue with Girish Chandra Ghosh. So Naren says, can infinite have parts? What does Hamilton say? Now this is what irritated sometimes Sri Ramakrishna, because these people, these young boys who came, they had studied a lot in philosophical subjects. So naturally Hamilton, Herbert Spencer, Tyndall, Huxley, they were the people whose views were studied extensively by most of the young college going students who took philosophy as their subject, or even general readers were very much well versed with these thoughts of Hamilton, Herbert Spencer, who are philosophers, Tyndall and Huxley. So maybe this is, I don't know which Huxley it is, but one of the Aldous Huxley or Julian Huxley, we do not know, but they were all great philosophers. So this is the discussion. Now, can the infinite have parts? All of them said the infinite can always has to be infinite. It cannot assume parts. It is like saying the Brahman is infinite, so how can he be? How can he have parts, or how can he become limited? So the idea is that infinite cannot have parts. Now this is according to Western philosophy. Now let us see how Sri Ramakrishna is answering this. Now Sri Ramakrishna to M. Now even Sri Ramakrishna is getting a bit restless now, because he sees there is no end to this. So after the discussion is over, he knew now it is so Naren is now bringing in the whole of Western philosophy. Now he is really irritated, like Ram was. Ram said, why, what's the use of such conversation? But now he feels, even Sri Ramakrishna feels, that this is going too far. So he tells M, very like a child, he tells him, I don't like such conversation. I see everything as God. So now he is telling about his own experiences. Why do you argue? Now you don't go that far. You people argued, I explained and tried to support either Naren or Girish wherever they needed support. But now if you bring in all the Western philosophers and all these confusions, he didn't like that. He says, I see everything as God. So what is the, he says, if I experience, then if Tyndall says something or Hamilton says something or Herbert Spencer, what does it, it doesn't, I don't care, I don't bother. He says, what is there to reason about? If I see something, if I see milk, then you may tell, no, this is not milk, and you may try to convert. But he says, I am seeing this as milk. So you don't tell me, I am seeing the particular object. So I see that he is all, he means God is all, and that he has become everything. He is this as well as that. In one state of mind and the intellect are lost in the absolute. When I see Narendra, my mind is absorbed in the intellect. Now, he says there are two views. One is to look upon God as a personal God. But when I think about Narendra, who believes in an impersonal God, he thinks about the absolute and his mind merges in samadhi. When you reach samadhi, when you reach that high state, what Sri Ramakrishna is saying is true. What Naren is saying is true, because God is beyond speech and mind. To that you have to attain to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But when you are at a lower plane, that is also true. You are worshipping God, whom you see as whom you want to see as a human being, who comes a very loving human being, an avatara, just like Hanuman used to say. Hanuman has mentioned when he was asked, how do you see upon Rama? So he says, I assume three attitudes towards Rama. When I think I am the body, when I am at the lowest plane, then I think I am the servant and he is my master. That was the attitude he had towards Rama. So he said, when I am thinking I am a body, when I identify myself with the body, I am the servant or I am the dasa, and Sri Ramachandra is my master. So I serve him because I am serving him with my body. But when I am thinking that I am the mind, I am not the body, when I identify myself with the mind, then I am a part and he is the whole. I am that small part of the infinite mind which is Rama's mind, and I am a part of that because I am connected to him. But when I think of myself as the soul, as the spirit, then there is no difference between me and Rama. The body goes, the mind goes, so only the spirit remains. Then, so these are the three different levels Sri Ramakrishna is saying, and that's why he says, he is asking Girish, what do you say to this? Say something. Girish laughs. He understood. Now I can't argue more, because Sri Ramakrishna has said the final word, that from different levels Naren is true, from his level, from your level you are also true. So there is no point in quarreling. So Girish laughs and says, I have understood nearly everything but this, because Girish doesn't want to accept, he still wants incarnation. He says, I am happy to see you, because he is at the level of the body. So he wants Sri Ramakrishna in the human body, or he wants to worship God in the human body, because he is honest enough to admit that I have my body consciousness, I am worldly. He was, in fact, Girish Ghosh's life, if you see, he could not, he was very honest about his own life. He never tried to hide or pretend that I am a spiritual person. He just said, I am what I am. Now you accept me as I am. And Sri Ramakrishna accepted him. So he said, I need an incarnation to save me, because I am a worldly person. So I think I am the body and I need an incarnation, but I have faith that even though I am a worldly person, by hitching my wagon to the wagon of the Ishta, the God Supreme, who has come as a human being just to save me. Now this is a tremendous faith which Sri Ramakrishna did not want to disturb. He agreed with Narendra, but he did not disagree with Girish. He knew that God has created him so that he is attached to this world. But because he was attached to the gross aspect of Sri Ramakrishna, though he might not have taken him as a spirit, like Narendra did. Narendra was a superior kind of devotee. But Girish Ghosh, with all his limitations, because he accepted the incarnations 100%, surrendered to him, even with all his limitations, even with all his evil qualities, God took upon the sins, or they say, God took upon the whole responsibility, because he had faith, implicit faith, that I may be weak, but I am connected to somebody for whom this weakness is nothing. He can remove it at an instant and make me, release me from this bondage. And that is what happened in the case of Girish. So he is not able to accept Narendra's argument fully. He says, I don't care what happens, what Naren says, but I know I want you as a guru who helps me in the gross world as much as in the subtle world or in the world of the spirit. I don't know, because I have not seen the spirit, but I have faith that even if I believe in somebody whom I can see, if I believe in my guru will take me to that Satchidananda or whatever it is. So he had that tremendous faith in his guru who had taken his responsibility. So if one has that, it is as good as having faith in the Antaryami, the God who is sitting within the heart, or also having faith in the Supreme Brahman, which Swamiji believed in. And he says Swami Vivekananda also is true, because when I see him, I see that burning faith that he doesn't need the help of anybody. But for that reason, he did not criticize Girish also. So we have to remember this, and I conclude. If there are some questions now, we can have a few questions. We are just running. Yes. Yes, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yes.
I'm trying to understand more the significance of the mantra purifying the body,
Yes.
the physical,
Yes.
when it remains that physical thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Why? Tell more, please.
No, it purifies mantra. You have perhaps understood it partially, because it purifies not only the body, but it purifies all the levels of our existence. You see, it doesn't stop with purifying of the body. Purifying of the body is the first step. So in yoga also, whether you take mantra yoga, japa, or bhakti, or raj yoga, the first step is yama and niyama, if you see, and that deals with the Annamaya Kosha. So we try to purify our actions, purify our body, try to see good things, try to hear good things, try to do good things. So when we do that, we are purifying our body. We begin with purifying our body and also the mind to some extent. So our indriyas, our body, everything is purified, but that is the lowest purpose of the mantra. That is one of the important purposes, no doubt. Mother says that every repetition, if not anything else, if it may not reveal higher things to you, at least it will purify your body. So it purifies not only the body, it purifies the mind, but as you persist, it purifies our higher mind, it illumines the buddhi, as Sri Ramakrishna was saying. We see the light within, we see the Antaryami, we perceive the Antaryami, we feel that the light within is inspiring us in all situations, in all circumstances, he is with us, and then finally he will take us to the goal with the help of the Guru is supposed to do that, whether you Sri Ramakrishna is the supreme Guru. So Sri Ramakrishna comes in the form of the Guru, and the Guru's mantra and the Guru both have that responsibility of taking you to him, to Sri Ramakrishna. So that is maybe in the initial stages, as you said, it is meant to purify the body. Okay? But that is not all. See, that is the first step. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Any more question?
Hello, Maharaj, can you hear me?
Yes, please. Can you tell me your name? Who is Dankruti?
Maharaj,
Okay. Okay, fine.
Yes, Maharaj.
Yes.
Maharaj, with reference to Shuddha Mana, Shuddha Buddhi, so can we say that Mana is a more general term and Buddhi is the discriminative faculty of mind?
Yes. Actually, Mana, and see, when Thakur in another place he says this, here he says Shuddha Buddhi can perceive the Shuddha Atma. He is correcting Narendra. But in another place, in Bengali he said Shuddha Mon, Shuddha Buddhi or Shuddha Atma Ek. Now he is talking of the man of a realized soul. I mean, a person who has a Shuddha Buddhi and has perceived the Atman, his man also will be like that. The mind of Sri Ramakrishna, for example, the mind of Holy Mother, for example, that mind was pure to the very core, whereas all other people who were much lower, the other who were not incarnations, their mind would have some kind of impurity. So Shuddha Man, Shuddha Buddhi, Shuddha Atma is true for people who are who can be said to be incarnations or the Ishwar Kotis, who always perceive the Satchidananda within their hearts, within everywhere. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. If I see God everywhere, then what is there to argue? I am seeing it. He is seeing it with the mind. He is speaking to Mother with his mind, with his sense organs also. He is talking to Mother, is perceiving Godhood in the form of his Divine Mother. So in that sense, what you said, Sri Ramakrishna himself had said, Shuddha Man, Shuddha Buddhi and Shuddha. But the difference is there. Shuddha Buddhi and Shuddha Man are not the same. Okay? When it comes a little lower than the Buddhi, it becomes a Man. That is how we can understand the utterances of these great prophets. When they come down to the level of speech, somebody has to utter, isn't it? That's why Girish Ghosh says, if God does not teach us, then who else will teach us the spiritual truths? So God comes in the form of the Guru and gives the mantra. The mantra itself is a manifestation of that Brahman, but the mantra has to be uttered by the mind. So the mind gets purified. Then the mantra has to be uttered and it reveals the Shuddha Buddhi. The Buddhi also, it makes just what Sharon was asking. It starts with the body, but it continues. The Shuddha mind becomes purified as a result of a pure body, and then the mind becomes so sharp and subtle. The intellect also is illumined by that, and finally you see that it is nothing but the Shuddha Atma, which was shining through all of these. Okay?
Okay, Maharaj.
Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. Any more question?
Maharaj, may I ask a question?
Yes. Who is that? Tushar.
Tushar, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Namaste, Maharaj.
Namaste.
Is it for, let's say we've got 7 billion Jivatmas or humans on planet Earth, is it a one-to-one relationship between the koshas? So there will be 7 billion Vijnana Maya koshas?
No, it doesn't. No, 7 billion is just the human population, 7 billion. Why don't you consider the insects and the animals, the animal kingdom and the viruses? Why do you leave them out? So
yes.
they are also equally powerful. They have showed that they can be so powerful. They can control us. So every Prakriti, whatever creation itself, at that level of the gross, subtle and the causal level, they are all connected. When it is connected at the causal level, we call it Ishvara. When it is connected at the mental level, we call it Hiranyagarbha. And when it is connected at the physical level, we are part of Virat. So that is the technical word which is used. It begins at the physical level, atomic level, where living or non-living also is part of it. So there is no such thing as difference in the gross. The gross is one continuous entity, living or non-living. Only the non-living being has the capacity to go and attain subtler and subtler levels and go beyond them. So the second level is from Virat. Virat is the universal conscious, universal physical body of the reality. I mean, the whole Prakriti, the physical part of it, is Virat. And in Vedanta they say, when it comes to the mind, all the sum total of all minds, that is known as Hiranyagarbha. So our minds are part of that Hiranyagarbha. So we are not as independent as we think. We think we are independent. That ego makes us feel that we are so important and so independent, but we don't have any independence. We are as much a slave as a prisoner in the jail, mentally. So we are part of that universal mind, which is Hiranyagarbha. And finally, when it comes to the causal level, the Karana Sharira, the sum total of Karana Sharira, where our destiny is as it were stored, the sum total is Ishvara. So that's why we pray to Ishvara. We say that our destiny is in your hands. Whatever I may try at the lower levels, at the levels of gross or subtle mental level, ultimately it is the Karana Sharira which at the highest level which determines our fate. Okay. So they are all, yes, they are connected at different levels. Names are different, but it is the same Prakriti which is manifesting itself is gross, at subtle, the causal, and finally beyond that the Purusha, which has nothing to do with the Prakriti. It illumines the whole play of Prakriti. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no more questions, I'll call it a day today, or I have a little bit of time if anybody has any question.
Maharaj?
Yes.
Sorry, just another one. It's an odd question, but I was curious why you said the word gospel. Like, it's a very Christian word. Like,
yeah, it's a good Christian word, but the translation, the original word is Kathamrita. The Kathamrita, Amrita means nectar. The nectar-like words of Sri Ramakrishna. When you call Sri Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita, that means the nectar-like words which have come out of the mouth of Sri Ramakrishna. That was used to describe Sri Krishna's words in the Bhagavata. Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam. Tava Kathamritam means the nectar-like words of Sri Krishna as described in the Bhagavad Gita. So, but in English, you don't have a single word for that. Nectar-like words, that will be a long title. You see, but they took it from the Bible. In the Bible, the same idea is there. God's spell, I mean God, whatever God speaks, His words are divine. They may not use the Kathamrita, Amruta or nectar, but they use that it is God's words, so they are holy. So that's why the gospel according to Saint Luke, because they believed that it were God's words that were revealed through Jesus. That's what they believe. But it doesn't mean that that gospel is a generic word term. It's used for any God. I mean, it can be any incarnation. So, gospel of Sri Ramakrishna means considering Sri Ramakrishna as the divine incarnation, his words which have been compiled, which is Kathamrita in Bengali or Sanskrit, will be compared to the God's words as they were revealed maybe in the Bible or any other sacred like Dhammapada of Buddha also. So you can call that also Gospel of Buddha. In fact, we have published a series of books, small booklets, the Gospel of Sri Krishna, the Gospel of Holy Mother, the Gospel, it can be anybody. Okay, so it's not just specific to Christianity, but the Gospels in a general way it is used to refer to the Bible, biblical compilation. Okay. So can I take your leave now?
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you. Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibiditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuvi Ye Burida Janaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.